Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Still one or two people in the waiting room, so I guess they will join us very shortly. But good to see you all here again. So welcome to the EOcafe. Today we're going to talk about data spaces. But just before we start, a reminder: keep your microphones off unless I ask you to join the conversation. Which I will do if you put questions into the chat and we're able to take them. And you're very welcome to keep your cameras on. We like to see people, but we understand that sometimes it doesn't work, so it's up to you. But that is completely optional. So now, EOcafe. Well, as I said, today we're going to talk about data spaces. It's a term which has become very much in vogue recently. Yet seems to be little understood. At least I can say that I don't understand very much about them, so I'm looking to learn something. ERSC has a working group on the Green Deal, which has been looking at data spaces and dedicated to the topic. And a new project has just started called GREAT, which has the goal to define a roadmap for the creation of a common Green Deal data space. So there's quite a lot happening and quite a few things that we can discuss, as well as the basics. So joining me in the EOcafe this week, who can help us understand, is your Yuri Rubricht. Yuri is with DG Environment, is an Environmental Information Management Policy Officer. As is customary, I'll just ask Yuri to introduce himself and help us to understand a little bit better where you're coming from. Yuri, please.
Thanks a lot, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yuri Rubricht. I'm a policy officer at DG Environment, DG Environment of the European Commission, and I'm part of the digital team in DG Environment strategy unit, which is called ENF01. So we don't have normally units have a letter attached to them as well. We don't have a letter, we just have 01, which is very special, to be honest. So I've been active in the field of geographic information for more than 25 years now. I started working at the Agency for Geographical Information in Flanders in the public administration from 95 till 2015, mostly focusing on setting up business processing, geospatial business processes, ranging from a spatial data acquisition to also the management and management of data to spatially enabled end-user applications. So in 2015, I actually joined the Commission, DG Environment, where I started working on the contribution, actually on the management of the INSPIRE directive, which is the infrastructure for spatial information in Europe. I also follow up on the digital policies. And since that, my colleague Hugo de Groof left me a while ago last year and he retired. I'm also following up for the moment on Space Copernicus and also the endeavors that we have and the initiatives around geospatial intelligence to promote the implementation of the environmental acquis. But I mentioned the INSPIRE directive, and I think that's a very important aspect here to be mentioning it, because it becomes more and more important also in view of the development of the data spaces. Geoff already gave a nice overview. We also mentioned the GREAT project, which will be responsible for developing part of the Green Deal data space, at least the definition part to start with, which is very nice. But I don't know if I should go into details already, Geoff. I think I should keep it for the moment to just my bio and introduction of myself. But just on the INSPIRE side, I also want to mention that we did an evaluation of that directive last year, somewhere in summer. And we are now starting with the revision, with an impact assessment of the INSPIRE directive and the Public Access to Environmental Information directive, because these are very old instruments. Yeah. And we are trying to revise those instruments to be more apt or more effective in supporting to bring in public data into the Green Deal data space, without further discussing what a data space is in detail, but at least the public data is captured by these two legal acts. And we are trying to modernize these legal acts to fully align it with the developing horizontal digital data legislation in Europe, Data Act, Data Governance Act, and so on. At the same time, bring all that data in the data space for a lot of broader reuse also by private sector of public sector data. Just as a kind of a teaser and a small introduction of who I am and what I'm doing for the moment in the Commission.
Well, you've touched on a lot of aspects of the data space there, but we'll certainly explore them in more detail as we go on, more detail and depth. And certainly, INSPIRE was something important for the sector, and we've known Hugo for some time. So maybe that's something else to come back on. Maybe not so much today, but in future, how the evolution of Inspire could be an interesting topic to talk about. I think it's fair to say that data is really at the heart of our business. In the EO sector, everything is about, what, EO services sector, at least everything is about data. And even if satellite data, Earth observations is at the core, to make it important, to make it possible to interpret that data requires further data, further in situ data. So the idea of bringing together different data into one area, one accessible instrument is really important, I think, for the sector. So there is a strong interest in how to organize data and how to develop common structures, how to make it more accessible, how to provide the tools that can help us understand it for manipulating that data. This is also at the heart of the DAS that we talked about 2 or 3 EOcafes ago. Now, data is also at the heart of the European digital strategy, and it is recognized that smart data can have a transformative effect on the economies and many different sectors. So in developing the concept of data space, there are 9 societal challenges which have been figured for identified to become data spaces, like energy, like health, like mobility, and of course the Green Deal, which we'll talk about more here. So the European strategy for data aims to create, now this is, I'm taking text from Commission documents here, aims to create a single market for data that will support both Europe's global competitiveness, we'll come on to that, and its data sovereignty. It should make public data more readily available, as well as offering the possibility of commercial data to be accessed alongside. And so data spaces form a key part of the strategy for the data-driven European economy. I've got some more text from documents published by the Commission, but I think I'll skip over that.
Yeah, we've been writing hundreds of pages on these topics, so you could read for another 5 hours.
I wasn't paid to read all of that.
And still stay some at the abstraction level that it's not really understandable what we're talking about. But
well, that's why we're here, to try to interpret.
But well, as far as we see it, as far as I see it, because it's always a personal interpretation of the text, but I think there's a kind of a consensus that when you talk about data spaces as such, it's all about the implementation, as you said, of the European data strategy. That's data space is an implementation of the European data strategy, where we are trying to realize a free flow of data in the single market, and that to actually complement the already existing freedoms, the free movement of goods, capital, services, and people, and that should be now completed with the free flow of data in that single market to create the real data economy, to put Europe into the picture, maybe on top again of the data economy globally. But that's an ambition level that will be realized over the next 10 years. We also have a flagship initiative which is called the Digital Decade, that is aiming at bringing Europe again to the front as a front runner of the digital transition, that looks at the data at where the data strategy is a part of it, but also the CHIPS Act, being independent of materials, being independent of external international producers for our electronic devices, for the development of our digital transition, and so on. So it's in essence, it's about developing this kind of free flow of data in Europe to further develop the data economy. It's also a strategy where legislation and the funding go hand in hand. So we have a big funding apparatus behind it, which is called the Digital Europe program. And Jeff already mentioned the great project, which is funded, I think, for 2 million euros by the Digital Europe program. Destination Earth, which is another initiative, I think ERSC is also involved. That was funded for about 100 million euros. It will be refunded in a second work program for another 60 million euros. So there's a lot of money In total, we are talking about 8 billion euros that will be spent through the Digital Europe funding program over the next 5-6 years. So there's a lot of money put behind it. On the legal side of things, unfortunately, we are pretty advanced, but there are still several legal instruments that are being negotiated between Parliament and Council. We already have the Data Governance Act, which is pretty important when we talk about intermediaries, the notion of intermediaries, and extending the use of public data also by private sector. I'm thinking here about secondary health data, for example, patient records, but I think also on Earth observation data, there will be possibilities to bring in the data, to reuse the data to some extent. Copernicus is a good example of open data in which the data can be reused, already being reused by private sector, but we could further improve that reuse under the Data Governance Act. But the Data Act, for example, which is also a very important act that tries to bring the data ownership sovereignty back to the data, the consumer. And then we're thinking about things like Internet of Things, IoT devices, in which that the consumer gets the access and gets the ownership of the data, allowing him to remarket the data, to resell the data if necessary, to make it available to public authorities, private sector companies, if he wants to, being compensated for it. So that's the Data Act. That is still under negotiation. We expect it to come out of Parliament and Council negotiations before summer, and go into work by next year, hopefully. So there is the legal aspect of it. There is the funding aspect of it. They're quite connected. They go hand in hand, and that's all about, in the end, about creating these data spaces, sectorial data spaces, in those areas, as already mentioned by Jeff, of public interest and in strategic economic areas. That's why the first 9 were selected together with the Open Science Cloud, which was the 10th, which was not a real data space. In the meantime, they already extended. It's a non-exhaustive list because, of course, because we already extended the data spaces to 14 for the moment, on top of the things like the Green Deal data space, energy, smart mobility, agriculture, health, and so on. We also added tourism, skills, media, and language data spaces.
Okay.
And the Digital Europe program is supporting all of the data spaces for the implementation. Now,
there was quite a good brochure produced, which was where I was taking some of the quotes that I haven't used. I mean, just very simply, in simple terms, what is a data space?
Well, the data space is a combination of a technical infrastructure and governance aspects. Both of them go hand in hand. It's a set of legal rules that protects a data holder, that supports or facilitates the sharing of data in Europe and also outside of Europe. At the same time, when sharing the data outside of Europe, also protecting European interests of the SMEs that should get a better place compared to the hyperscalers. That's why we have this entire legal framework, and that's part of the governance. It's also trying to identify all the data holders that should participate in these data spaces. And in the end, the larger ambition is to have one European common data space where the data flows freely. Now, to make this manageable, of course, they've created sectorial data spaces so that certain DGs in the Commission can start managing their sectors on health, on energy, on climate and environment. So we have already our communities out there. So we created this sectorial data space as a solution to the government issue, governing all these data spaces, all these sectors from a single point. That would be unfeasible. So that's why we have created all these sectorial data spaces, but in the end, they have to be interconnected. They have to be interoperable. Data flowing should flow through all these data spaces. There's generic data, there is Earth observation data that will be used by a lot of sectors. I can imagine at least 40, 50 sectors maybe that should actually start using Earth observation, from the industry to the automotive sector and so on. Even the citizens using Earth observation data these days. So that is typical, that has to flow. This is all the geospatial data, that's generic data, has to flow through all the data spaces. All the interoperability aspect of these data spaces is also very important. It is actually, it is a data market. If you look at it, if you look at the app markets, we will have a data market where all the data will be in there. Public companies will provide the data, probably as open data, ruled by the Open Data Directive. Private companies can bring in their data for reselling, maybe also for sharing the data with public administrations. For this, we have a data altruism mechanism in the Data Governance Act. Well, this is all possible, but it's kind of this common market for data that facilitates the free flow of data from public administrations to start with, but also helps private companies, big, small companies, to remarket their data, make their data available to other end users.
Yeah.
And in these data spaces, I think, in my point of view, you got three big players. You got the besides the technological infrastructure, which is essential to implement all this, but you have the data holders, you have the intermediaries, and you have the end users.
Yeah.
And the intermediaries are public authorities, or private sector companies. Everybody who's manipulating or is actually getting access to raw data and to native data, process that data, whether it's through simple algorithms, whether it's through AI, create added value, remarket that data, selling it to the end users. And that's governed by a common infrastructure, an infrastructure that's being built on, that probably will live on the cloud to a large extent, but also on the edges. If you look at the smart devices, IoT devices, when I look at electric cars, these are typically devices on the edge that are collecting a lot of data, or sending that data to a cloud infrastructure for processing. The consumer of the electric vehicle get access to that data. He can decide to reshare that data of his electric vehicle about his charging positions, charging locations, his decharging locations, about his battery life cycle. He can share the battery life cycle with, and the product passport of that battery life cycle with somebody else. It could be a reuser of batteries that uses a car batteries for domestic use in a second life, and so on. It could also be a recycler. So there is a lot of things that make that that is all about data spaces.
Yeah.
It's nothing really complex. It sounds difficult because it's taken on from
it's quite abstract, I think, which is why it's hard. But a common market for data, I think, is a nice term. And I mean, what strikes me there is one of the key aspects is discoverability. It's being able to discover that there are certain data available, and then to be able to know where to go to get hold of that data. Because I get, we're not talking about a big data lake with all data thrown into it. We're talking about data held where it's appropriate, but being discovered or enabled through the data.
I think we've been building these catalogs for years now. Also in Inspire, we have the Central European Catalog for Geospatial Data. It does not reach everyone. So I think if you think about the future catalog or discovery of data, then the back-end infrastructure, the catalogs have to be connected to smart and intelligent browsers like or search engines like Google search engine, Bing search engine, that all picks up on the availability of data, make it easy available. But at the end, if you go to the linkages, you should end up in the within the data space infrastructure and on the catalog, where you can actually get access also to the use conditions of certain data. That is very clear. But that is an important aspect, and certainly on these aspects, like how to make the data discoverable, how to make it accessible. So which catalogs to use, which APIs to use to make it available. What are the how can you actually protect the data? How can you have this consumer data of your smart devices in a private data space? And we are looking at different solutions. There you got solid my data for these kind of things. But these technical reusable infrastructure building blocks are being identified by another initiative, which is called the Support Center for the Data Spaces, which is also funded in the DEP. That is, I think, leading there. The main project leader is Boris Otto from the Fraunhofer Institute from the moment, but it's a big consortium as well. And their main objective is actually to identify these reusable building blocks, these standards, these API standards to be used in all these data spaces. So actually making a cookbook for data spaces that we should all implement from all sectorial implementations. But still, it will be very federated. It will not be centralized. If you look at the manufacturing data space, I'm coming back to this later, maybe also may touch upon the Green Deal data space specifically, but the manufacturing data space is not implemented by the Commission, it's implemented by the companies. It's the industry who will implement their data space, and will have the operational and management data in their data space and making that data available through APIs. And that API will be picked up by some client. It could be a customs application that says, well, you're an international producer and you want to market your product in the European market, so you have to adhere to some rules. So we will check your data space, your manufacturing data space, with your manufacturing data to see if your data, for example, if your products are sustainable enough, or we should at extra taxes because you're not sustainable enough when you enter the European market. So it's also a defensive system, as you can call it, that will use the same data internationally, because data spaces, it's a European initiative, but it has a global scope.
Yeah, I want to come on to that, but firstly, I mean, we have obviously in the sector there are companies selling EO data, selling information services based on that data. What do they do to make their data available through the data space?
Well, the first thing is there is no such data space specific, and that's all. It's not really a complaint, but we said it as well. There is no real data space for geospatial data. There is no real data space for Earth observation data. But in the end, it's everywhere, and you will just have to pick up and follow up on the common building blocks. And if you have your data and you want to remarket, most of the companies have their own systems to remarket their data, make their data available. Now, these systems will have to be connected to a central system in the future. To get a better coverage. But even if you have your own system and then you align it with the interoperability requirements for data spaces, I think that would be the easiest way. But everybody is responsible for developing their own API access to their data. It's going to be the intermediaries, and it's going to be the governance system around those data spaces that make it particular and that will tie everything together in a European context. So that's why I said from the very beginning, legislation is very important. The technical infrastructure will follow. We will start to develop this in the coming months. The support center will work on this, and I think within the next 2 years, they should deliver something that is meaningful, a cookbook that will give a kickoff of how the first data spaces will look like. In the meantime, there are data spaces already being developed, and I'm looking specifically at the health data space and the mobility data space that are making that are already negotiating with the automotive sector at DG Move in the Commission to see how these data space can take form. And they will also probably bring in their standardization experiences as we go along in the roadmap. When we come back to the Green Deal data space, and I think Earth observation data has a very important part in the Green Deal data space, because we're using it now for the moment to actually assess the changes in the landscape and the land use, the land coverages to a large extent. We have done this in the past as well. We're using it to identify illegal landfills. We're using this to identify deforestation. We are using this to identify areas of drought and their impact on the agriculture. We're using this to identify eutrophication. All the relevant Earth cycles and geophysical systems, to a large extent, can be monitored through Earth observation data. That's why Earth observation is such an important set of data also for the Green Deal data space, and will get a role in it. And I think it's already very well framed as well under the Destination Earth initiative, where the European Space Agency, and you're part of it as well, so you might know better than I do, but I think one of the first exercises there is also to identify the necessary data and how to see how we can bring more data in it, that we can complement the Earth observation data with more in situ data. Copernicus can help there, but probably other initiatives as well. And typically those data spaces, they might bring out the data that is relevant also as in situ data to complement the already existing intelligence, geospatial intelligence systems based on Earth observation data, or develop better AI systems. I said, when I see the evolutions in your field of work in the sector of Earth observation, how systems are using AI to monitor the sustainability of production facilities, for example, that are geographically dispersed. I think it's quite fascinating. It's monitoring greenhouse gas emissions. It's looking at the use of materials based all on Earth observation data. So it's pretty impressive, and I think that will become more and more important. And it's just a way to find a way for the sector, at least the Earth observation sector, to actually tap in to that stream of data, to actually even improve the possible applications of the data. I think most of the companies are not just acquiring data and selling data, they're also selling knowledge and intelligence to some extent. And I think that's where the power will be. So by definition, these companies will act as an intermediary. They will sell their data, but they also provide services to make added value on top of that data. Could be their own data, could be other data as well. And again, it's important to have a bit of a overview on the legal framework as well, because you know that the Data Governance Acts and the Data Act to some extent do limit the possible use of data that you get from partners. So there might be limiting reuse conditions. And there is, of course, when you're not a European company, you will be limited more than European companies, as it looks like right now, because you will not be allowed to remarket that data in ways that are not allowed by the reuse conditions under which the data has been made available. Which in many cases now, if you look at Google and Microsoft, they're getting a lot of data. If you look at Samsung, to your mobile phones, they do get a lot of data from you, and they remarket that data in so many ways, making a lot of money out of it, making a digital twin of you without you giving your consent. But you give consent when you accept it to use an Android OS or whatever.
Yeah.
But these things are changing as well, and that you have to be aware of these things, that there's going to be a very strict framework of data reuse as well in place.
So how will that be controlled through these data spaces, and how will that help the European industry particularly?
Well, it will help the European industry in a sense that if you can keep the European acquired data in Europe and develop your own solutions on top of it, at least you can create an advantage. If by definition the data flows to China, to the US, or to Japan, and then data is remarketed there and sell back to EU, then you will never develop the innovative industry, and you will always look. We always have a step behind. And I think that's the larger ambition of the European data strategy and the digital decade, is actually to bring some of that data and that knowledge, a lot of knowledge in Europe, but make sure that also the implementations and the possible business value can also stay in Europe, because we see that one is moving away fast from Europe.
I mean, this has been a subject that the sector's much discussed in relation to Copernicus and the free and open data policy. And our view on that has been that it's public data. It should be made available, freely available. But it's the European taxpayer who's paid for it. And so questions asked about availability outside of Europe. The rationale being that it's very hard to protect that data. It's very easy to set up a subsidiary in Europe and then just access the data and
Yep.
export it. So why won't the same thing happen with the data spaces? What will then protect the data for European sources?
Well, there is legislation, and there is, of course, also when you look at the Digital Market Act, then there's also the gateway keeper function that will be taken up by the Commission, who will monitor, and will get some of the funding through the hyperscalers as well, that are entering the market to get the money to supervise how data has been dealt with and used with. Beyond that, there's also technology, as I said, regarding data that is being acquired through sensors, whether it's called IoT or your electric vehicle, whatever, or your television or your fridge. There you will in the future, and there are proof of concepts with Solid and My Data, which is two private data spaces that in the future will try to get all the data from the IoT devices and from your personal data in your personal data space, and get access and effectively implement the way you can actually set your consent rules and the reuse conditions for your data. So you could revoke reuse rules, and then the company using your data will be informed about the revocation of the rights to use that data. Of course, they can always decide to say, well, we just continue using it. Yeah. And that would be fraud and crime. But that's already happening. So, but if you have the legislation in place and you're infringing it, then actually it's a crime. And the effectiveness of the legal system, that's a completely different discussion, but that's the safeguard more or less for avoiding data escaping Europe one way or the other. But if you have subsidiaries, as you already said, in Europe, then okay, you're creating a market in Europe and you're creating jobs in Europe. Yeah. So you're bringing some of the added value to Europe as well. I think that works well, and that's not prohibited in the current legal or in the new legal framework either. And of course, I see that there's already a lot of questions in the
there's a lot of interesting questions, and I'm very tempted to move on to some of them. This whole question of the access to the data, though, I think is fundamental. We've always you talk about creating jobs in Europe, and that we would fully support, and as part of our as ERSC approach. one of our tests is that there is value added going on. So if it's a company that's set up in Europe, it's not just a sales office or something which is a tube to another manufacturing site, that there is actually value added work going on as well. But it's easy to say and not always so easy to prove.
I have to be honest as well, Jeff, the legislation as it is now is not that discriminating, because there's always an assessment of certain countries to what extent they are respecting data rules and actually implementing and making sure that the implementations are compliant with the existing legislation. And that will be checked as well. And from the moment, then I can imagine that US and EU have at a certain stage will have an agreement between them about the data sharing and the free flow of data, and I think that's already in the making to a large extent. So that would not be a big issue. I think we rather would be with China and other continents and other countries that might be a bigger danger, but that's to be seen, and it's all part of the negotiations, because data has become a commodity. It's part of the digital of the single market. It will become part as a freedom. So at that point, it needs to be negotiated. And I think that's important as well, to give guarantees to both private sector and public sector and any data holder and data consumer. So we'll see how that evolves.
Okay. There are some interesting questions. Let me open it up a little bit and maybe we come back later. But Giacomo Martirano is talking about the risk of going back into data silos and not having the data sort of transversely available. Giacomo, do you want to come in and explain your question? Put it personally.
Thank you, Geoff, and hi, Yuri. We exchanged many ideas in many conferences about that. Of course, my little worry is that these many data spaces which are going to be developed with, let's say, governance models which are becoming out of several calls from the Digital Euro program by different consortia, despite there is the coordination of a central body behind that. Do you really see this risk? Of course, it's a bit provocative question, because I don't see the high risk to go back in data silos. But how do you see, in practical terms, the interoperability experience gained with Inspire, together with its simplification, which is enlarging a lot the arena of stakeholders involved? How do you see these risks can be really mitigated?
Well, the legislators have been very cautious about this, and they have enshrined this as a mechanism in the Data Governance Act. So the Data Governance Act will install a data innovation board, as they call it. That will manage interoperability or coordinate interoperability between data spaces as well. That is also taking into the Data Act, where there are rules on needs for interoperability between those data spaces. Now, and the operational arm of that data innovation board is the support center for data spaces. That will be the operational arm, and that data innovation board. So they will select, identify standards, and will discuss an interoperability rules, and they will discuss all this with the industry and the public sector together in the data innovation board. The plan for having this kickoff for the data innovation board is September 2023. But as far I asked our colleagues from DigiConnect as well, they still have to launch the call for nominations from both private and public sector. So it will be representation of private sector, public sector commission as well in that data innovation board, and they will discuss on the interoperability aspects of these data spaces. So that is a mechanism that should guarantee that we go away from silos, because as I said, in the intention of this European common data space in the European data strategy is to have only one data market and not several data markets for every sector. And I know that governances in the energy sector is different as governances in the finance sector, but we're not talking about the governance of finances and the governance of energy. It's all about the sovereignty of data and how you implement your data reuse conditions and what your data reuse conditions are. From a Green Deal perspective, we need them all. For the green procurement, we need the green financing data. We need that data. We need to see to what extent the investments that we are making are done for financing for the green transition. That's important as well. So we need the financing data. We need the more operational data on vehicles and so on. So that all this data needs to come together. The Data Innovation Board will be the governance instrument to do this. The Data Space Support Center will be the operational arm of that innovation board to bring all the players together to assess between industry, academia, public sector, which are the relevant building blocks. And that goes beyond, it goes beyond the sectors, because every sector, and if you look at the banking sector, you have SWIFT, they have their own they have their own set of building blocks. Every sector will have selected building blocks in their enterprise architecture that makes them working together within the sector with other companies, with other players. And that goes for every sector. And we will, on top of this, there will be a kind of a common interface how to make data available. And APIs go beyond, and they fall back on service-oriented architectures, REST-oriented architectures, could be even blockchain as a way to transfer data and to guarantee the legitimacy of data, but that's to be seen, and that's something that I think is difficult to. I think some people already have a clean idea, and I saw that there's a link with the International Data Space Organization. Of course, they've been working on this for a long time. They still adhere to the federated principles, but things are changing all the time. You never know what if you go to can't come on I forgot the word, but I call it this quantum computing. From the moment that you really have a working quantum computing environment, quantum computers, that might change things. We have now a new Gigabit Infrastructure Act that will promote increase of bandwidth. Now, having more bandwidth available will boost a lot of applications that were not possible before. So I can't imagine now. I also discussing all the time where should we put the logic, on the edge or in the cloud, because if we transfer data from edge to cloud, then the environmental impact is huge. If you have a big bandwidth and then you're even more transporting even more data from AI systems to learning and whatever for training systems, and that the impact on environment will be too big. So you will have to put some of the logic at the edge, and certainly for applications like high precision agriculture, most of the logic will be on the edge, and there will be a server that will get the data, processes the data, and sends process data to the cloud somewhere to store it. But these are all discussions, so I think it's very difficult to have a keen view on what the infrastructure will be. I'm pretty sure that there will be no more silos. I'm pretty sure of that. I think, how can you market data if you're living in a silo? That doesn't work anymore. And every data holder is looking at different ways to data market this data. And I saw references to Inspire as well. We've been working with data holders who got their money from taxpayers over the last 16 years. Now that money is drying up because they're not getting the money on tax. So they're trying to sell their data with a kind of fixed contract, a fixed data set. But that's not how the world works anymore. People are using apps, using different blends of data, so they pay per view on their data. So it's a more sophisticated way to remarket that data in many ways. But you should take advantage of these new business models, and all those business models, they will develop as well and evolve. They're evolving so fast. I was talking with Jeff this week, and I mentioned that if you look at the industry developing, and if you look at how production cycles are being managed these days and governed, they're very data-driven in some countries. In Europe, we're still a bit behind, but you've got the extrusive and the additive technologies as well that allow you to create new products on the fly based on the demands of the users, based on data you got yesterday. Not on a production plan you made 2 years ago. We're going to produce these kind of products and we will evaluate them. No, it's on the fly. You have new data, you got new interests, it's shifting away. You create new products within the sector that you're active in. So I think it's quite difficult to have a view. So I'm very interested on how this data support center will move forward and what will be the proposals. And I hope that some of you will be in this data innovation board to reflect on what is proposed there as well, as kind of the minimum interoperability that should be guaranteed to have this free flow of data, which is the essence. If you ask what is DG Connect's objective with this, or the Commission's objective, well, first is to be successful in the next 5 years and to deliver a data space. whatever, because we're all defining data spaces. Also in the Green Deal data space, the great project as the first objective has to define what is the data space, which kind of data should be in the data space, data scope, how should we govern all the data holders for that Green Deal data space, data governance blueprint, and an implementation roadmap. And that will be followed up with a new contract that will go to the implementation based on the usable building blocks for the sector defined by the support center for data spaces. So I think the mechanisms are out there. The security watches are out there to make sure that we don't go back to a silo world. I think we passed the silo world. It doesn't make sense anymore to live in a silo. I think if you mention the metaverse, then all your data should be in there. And our data spaces should be connected to a metaverse.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking of it as chicken and egg. You know, what's the incentive for a company to make its data available through the data space?
Bigger market. Huh? It's always a bigger market, more revenue, more solutions. It might initially take, like any innovation and any transition initially takes some efforts, and it paybacks in time. If you're looking at the short term, then of course, and if you don't move ahead, then you will be left in a silo. That's true, but you will be forced to provide your data according to certain legislations, to certain rules, to certain agreed rules on interoperability in the end. And if you're not participating, then the end users will say you're not adhering, you're not compliant with rules so much, you're not certified, whatever, regarding data spaces. So I cannot connect my backend to your data provisioning. So then you might have to use intermediaries and lose part of your income. Or you can decide.
It has to be sort of so successful that companies then see that that's the route to the market. That's why I said it's about chicken and egg, because until that's there, you know, I'm not sure the incentive is so strong, unless there's legislation which makes that the primary channel to government markets. Then you know there is a direct incentive. So do you foresee that sort of?
I can imagine that future procurements will be based, of course, on the developing legislation as well as a criteria. That will be also, and that will be an incentive for a lot of companies to at least make sure they participate in the data spaces. But I think if you can enter, and I think if you can improve, of course, it depends on how big the market in Europe is. And I think for Earth observation data, it's more difficult. If you're looking at smaller data on more targeted data, then you could say, well, in apps you can use that data and so on and so on. For insurance companies, they got very specific needs on income, on health, and so on. I think for Earth observation, because of the sheer volume of data and also the price in many cases, it's still to be seen how you can actually market it in a better way through the data spaces. But I think, and I really think that the Earth observation data to have as a way to get better access to near real-time data will become more and more important in the future. And Earth observation is more than satellite data. It's all sensors. It's all sensor that could be laser sensors, could be cameras, infrared, whatever, radar. It's used for so many things now. It's also used beyond the scope of visualization. It's also used to measure emissions these days. So it's very pragmatic. And I think there's a big market that can be further developed.
Yeah, I think the issue is about the volume and also the diversity of use.
Yeah.
Because you know, you talked about tens or even hundreds of different sectors earlier on, and I think that's absolutely true for Earth observation, and it's becoming apparent how broad that is. However, as I also said at the beginning, to interpret Earth observation data, it's essential to have some in situ data, some other measurements that go with it. So there is an incentive to bring it together, which of course is part of the idea behind the DAS. There was a comment earlier about, will this sort of replace the Copernicus data access system? I would assume they would be complementary, and that you know, the Copernicus, it would be like you know, somebody offering a service which is made visible through the data space becomes coherent with the standards, the regulations surrounding the data space, and that would again be a strong incentive.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
One of the we talked about the Green Deal, and I mentioned the great project earlier on. Perhaps it would be a good time just to hear a little bit more about GREAT. We've got Nevena Rasko on the call. So Nevena, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the GREAT project and the goal to develop this roadmap?
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you so much for the conversation so far. It was very interesting for me, and I'm very happy to hear, the reference to our project, GREAT. So I think it will be hard to add something, but maybe just, of course, the basis of the GREAT project, or the goal of the GREAT project, is to lay down the foundation of the Green Deal data space and its community of practice. All of this is built on the Commission's, Green Deal strategy, and also on the data strategy. And the final outcome of the project will be an implementation roadmap that includes, the key parts on how you can really have that Green Deal data space. I think it's important to highlight that we are not trying to create the technical infrastructure, because this is a coordination and support action project. So we are exploring, we are trying to figure out, what is already on the table. So we could also hear before that there is a destinationer, there is Copernicus. So in our case, our project is really not trying to reinvent the wheel, but to connect the dots of the already existing systems. And how do we want to arrive there? So as a first step, our aim is to establish this Green Deal community of practice, where EORSC has a huge role to play, of course, given your members and the activity is very relevant for our project. So indeed, now we are in that phase where we are trying to gather more people, more initiatives, stakeholders that are using data or would like to use data in the purpose to tackle the climate change or anything that is related to the EU Green Deal. I think in what was the challenge, or what is the ongoing challenge of the Green Deal data space, and I could also see it in the chat, is that Green Deal is big. It covers different kind of sectors, so it's very now to narrow it down, like the example of the manufacturing one, right? It's very easy to look at manufacturing because it's a sector that is well defined. In Green Deal, it's really above everything. So what we suggested, or what is the approach that we took in our consortium, is to look at specific EU strategies coming from the Green Deal. So one of that is the biodiversity. We are also looking at climate adaptation strategies, and then all of these are linking to other strategies as well. And in our activity, but it's also very important that we work together very closely with the Data Space Support Center, because of course they do an important work on the building blocks. And we are also meeting with our so-called high priority sectoral data spaces. So we are already in contact with the energy data space. Agriculture data space is also very important, of course, and they are also giving us input and the other way around. Also the smart communities and the smart cities and also the mobility one. So these are our key focus. But after we aim to build this community, the next step is, of course, to have the blueprint. So the architectural blueprint, so that is already an ongoing work that we do so far. And then, as you already mentioned, there are some important data sets. So one of the outcome of our project will be to publish the so-called priority data set. Of course, we have seen the recent announcement from the Commission on the high value data set. So that is something that we are taking into account, and our colleagues are also exploring what is also available. And then I think one of the unique feature of our project comparing to the other ongoing projects related to the Green Deal is the governance model and the business models, because as you were discussing, what is there for the private actors, or what is the benefits of being part of the Green Deal data space. So that is something that we are currently working on, and we will also publish the governance models and the business models of the Green Deal data space. And we are also talking to bigger actors to see what they are already doing. And all of these key components or key pillars will lead us to this roadmap that I already mentioned earlier. And we will publish the first roadmap already this year in September, and then we will publish the outcomes of the second phase. I think from 1 year from now, because our project has an 18 months duration. And I think we have a very good consortium, so we are covering different kind of aspects. So I think that is our key strength. So of course, beside ARs, we also have some key players that are included, that they have really direct access. For instance, we have Seascape. They are supporting the Secretariat of MODNet. MODNet is a marine data observation. And then we also have ECMWF, and through ECMWF, we are also talking directly, for instance, to Destination Earth. So just to keep it short, if there are any participants that would like to be involved in our work, I think my colleagues already shared in the chat our website. There is an application form. So in case you would like to be involved in our work, we have our doors open, so to say. So please sign up to the form, and our team will get in touch with you.
Okay, thank you, Nevena. And of course, for ERSC members, there's a working group that they can join, looking at the Green Deal and provide inputs on this. So from a sector perspective, there's an interesting comment in the chat about the incentive for putting data in there that we touched upon earlier, and I'm sort of thinking that we give our own personal data away so cheaply now. To get access to a piece of information on the web, we tick the boxes to allow the cookies and allow our data to be flown away. Yet when we try to provide incentives for people to put what can be not so much personal data, but data that's gathered, we talked about mobility or energy companies. Obviously, there's a commercial in-confidence aspect there, but people are much more reluctant to put their data away. It seems to me a bit of a dilemma, this conflict. I know in the agriculture sector, I mean, it's been much debated about who owns the data. Is it owned by the farmer? Is it owned by the machine that goes over the fields and collects the data? Is it owned by the data aggregators? Is it owned by the combine harvesters? So there are a lot of issues there to be sorted out. And if the sort of European strategy can help to get further clarity on those, of course, it's going to be extremely helpful.
Yeah, so the question of Torsten Reis as well, mentioning that a clear legal framework would help a lot before we start implementing things. And that's what certainly when you mention now the ownership of data in the agriculture sector, which has been and still is a big debate. And unfortunately, the Data Act is still under negotiation, but it looks like it will be coming out. There will be several amendments to it. And that one is pretty clear about that ownership. It goes to the owner of the device, of the IoT device. And the thing is, of course, if you as an agriculture, you sign a contract with the producer that says you lease the system, but you don't own it, then these things change. And people can be quite inventive in circumventing these rules, of course, but then at least there has to be clarity in the contracts as well, that if you sign such a contract on a leasing base for drones, for example, or for robots, that you don't get access to that data. You don't become the data owner, but it stays with the company. But that has to be clear in the contracts, which is not the case right now. Hence, all these discussions on how to get away from a certain service provider and go to another one, which seems to be very difficult in that sector.
And of course, in the example I was giving out, our personal data, we see the value in having access to this information that where we give that data away. The same needs to become true in other sectors as well, that it becomes reflected in the contract, in the contractual arrangement, that the incentive is paid for or recognized in some way. Some returns data, as was commented in the text about insurance.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. I also want to be briefly come back, Jov, if you want me,
Yeah.
on the GREAT project and the Green Deal data space. I think
Yeah.
just the GREAT project has, of course, the objectives, and if you want to really get involved in developing this Green Deal data space, then you should really reach out to the people from GREAT. They can actually get all your input and process all your input. On the political level, and you look at the DGs, we have, of course, also the management of the Green Deal data space, and there we have, and that's also mentioned in the EU strategy for data. You have the 4 main initiatives. I just want to give this also with to the people that, and I think there were, most of them were mentioned. There is a destination Earth, which is considered to be part of the Green Deal data space. There is the smart cities, smart sustainable cities initiative, Living Europe. That is also the digital twins on city level and so on. They're also part of the Green Deal data space. So there we're collaborating with our Connect colleagues. There's also in there the Green Data for All, which is the revision of the INSPIRE directive and the Public Access to Environmental Information directive, to bring all that environmental and other public data into the Green Deal data space. That is reinforced again by the high-value data sets implementing regulation under the Open Data Directive that was published in January, which and within 16 months has to be implemented. So if you're looking at in situ monitoring data, we're not just looking at the reported data by the member states, but all the sensors, all monitoring sensors on air quality, water quality, soil quality, that have to be shared by the member states. So we're looking at the shared compliance promotion exercise there as well to really make this happen the next 2 years. So that's something that's also in the pipeline. And the last one is the digital product passport, which is then a clearly is linked to the manufacturing data spaces. But that's a initiative of DG Environment as well, as part of the Sustainable Product Initiative, in which you say every product, even base material, will get a passport that describes its sustainability. It will describe its repairability, its life cycle, and so on, in a passport when he enters the market, whether it's coming from outside of Europe or for inside of Europe. So you should have a digital product passport with an initial focus on 3 sectors, on the textiles, on electric appliances, and on batteries. So that's what's going on for the moment in the Green Deal data space as the main components of it. And of course, people from the GREAT project will further amend it with other data needed for the sectors and for the reuse under the Green Deal data space. So I think it looks very exciting the coming years, but it has to be seen to what extent we can be successful. But we are really we can't on being successful.
It strikes me that Delphine, who's the policy officer for us, has a lot to do, has a lot to follow. You'll be kept busy.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any further questions that people want to ask before we close it? The Zoom facility now makes it much easier to follow raised hands. So if anyone has something they want to ask, then please, before I close the cafe, I'm happy to take some last questions. Is there any limit to the number of data spaces? I mean, you talked about going from 9 to 14. I mean, in theory, there could be hundreds for different sectors, for different suppliers. So
I think that
limited, or
well, the limit is that you can't keep extending the amount of data spaces within the current budget. So you have the Digital Europe program, which has a budget and will provide a budget for support of the implementation of data spaces. Now, I think in general, it was the essence was to identify the most relevant data spaces for both for industry as for public sector. And I think they managed to do that with the energy and the agriculture and the Green Deal data space and mobility. So all very relevant sectors have been selected already. And I think that will be further, that will grow. It's an unexhaustive list. But in the end, when you have 5 or 6 meaningful data spaces implemented and they work, and then they're operational, then the rest just follows the best practices or the good practices.
Yeah, you said also that it's driven as much by governance, and that the goal would be to sort of have this completely connected. So I guess that there's going to be sort of a certain moderation there. Though I'm struggling to see how one governance can deal with everything. There's a point about the timeline. When you talked about publications in September this year, and then in a year's time, I think.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the time frame?
Our time frame, when I'm looking at the legal framework, that's quite clear. You don't know how the Commission works, but there is a new European elections in 24 September. That means there will be a political freeze this summer. So any legislation that will be passed before 24 needs to pass before summer. That's why I say it's very important for the Data Act. Data Governance Act is out there. Europe Interoperable Act will also be negotiated. It will be out there. The Data Act will hopefully be out there, but the negotiations has to be ended before summer, and then we can go to a real adoption and publication of legislation. And that's the general plan. So Commissioner Breton is really hard on this one and pushing this forward. So I guess on the legal side, we will have a complete legal framework. We will follow up from the environmental side with the revision of the INSPIRE directive and the Public Access to Environmental Information directive for the next Commission, which will take office somewhere end of 24, beginning of 25. That means new legislation will come out in 25. So regarding the legal framework, we're looking at 24, 26. That's a kind of the time frame for having all the legislation in place. That should help us build the data spaces. When we're looking at the different programs, you have the Digital Europe program, and they're focusing now on deliverables in 24. That's the work program 21, 22. So by 24, we will have all the blueprints for the data spaces, and some data spaces will also already be implemented. For example, the health data space, and we will have the first reusable building blocks and an enterprise architecture delivered by the Database Support Center. That's end of 24, beginning of 25. Then we'll kick in the procurement for the new contracts. And that includes implementation of several data space, amongst with the Green Deal data space. And that work program that is led by DG Connect is the work program on the main Digital Europe program, and that is now being discussed inside of the Commission. It's almost finalized. It arranges the budget for 23-24, and that will run till 26 for the implementation. So the full time frame that we're looking at is 23-26. Yeah. And then most things should be operational to a large extent, I hope for. At least the blueprints will be implemented to some extent. It should become visible. And then it's the participation of public and private sector and citizens, because if you get ownership of your data again, and you are allowed by consent to share your data under certain use conditions with anybody you want, then they will also participate in that data economy to a large extent, providing in situ data. So that's also to look forward. But it's 23, 2026 financially, budget-wise, and legally. So that's where we are for the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Excuse me. We're after 5 o'clock, so perhaps we should draw things to a close. As usual, if anybody wants to stay around and just have an informal chat there, they're very, very welcome. The next EOcafe will be in 2 weeks' time, as usual. We're going to look at role of defence and security, and how that's evolving in relation to the EO sector and the role of EO technologies. So that should be another interesting discussion with a lot to address. Further reminder about the response to the industry survey. Please do respond if we need your answers. We need you. So everybody, Yuri, thank you very, very much for being with us. I think it was a very interesting discussion. Thank you for those who contributed in the chat. I tried to follow what was going on there. It's not so easy watching in all these places at the same time, but I was pleased there was quite a lot of interaction going on there. So, which is why I didn't call some of the questions into indirectly, because I saw it all happening in the chat. We'll probably come back to this topic, and as Yuri mentioned about the INSPIRE changes to the INSPIRE directive, I can see that would be an interesting topic to follow, as well as, of course, the Green Deal in general. So I can well see this as a topic we'll come back to. So Yuri, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Please.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeff. And I just want to make that's the last thing I will say. The link, if you look at the high value, take a look at the high value data sets. There are 6 categories. The second category is about Earth observation and environment. Yeah. So all the data is included there. So it will have an impact as well, both on the INSPIRE directive, but also on the way you probably are working with data for the moment. So, but it's
I'm probably not familiar with sort of the follow-on and all that, but we were involved in the discussions about the high-value data sets. Did provide some views there. Great, thank you. And so everybody, until next time, take care, stay healthy, and hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. But in the meantime, anybody who wants to now just open up their microphone. We turn the recording off. You can just join in the discussion, throw anything out there.